Welcome to the program. I'd like to extend a warm welcome to our studio audience.
Hi, everyone.
How are you guys? Great to have you guys here. Great to have you guys here. My name is Levi, this is Christina.
Hello.
And we will be hosting the Fishbowl as we take a look at the way God can take the mundane and turn it into something majestic. Joining us on the show, we have Makushla, welcome.
Welcome.
And we have Guy.
Yeah, good
Hey, guys.
Before we get into our discussion, we're going to take a quick look at what Pastor Buell has to say.
A text that I have a great admiration for is found in 1 Corinthians chapter 1, verses 26, all the way through to the end of the chapter. But in essence, it says this: think of what you were when you were called. Not many were wise, not many were influential, not many were of noble birth. But God chose the foolish things of the world. He chose the foolish things to shame the wise. He chose the weak things to shame the strong. And he chose the lowly things of this world and the despised things and the things that are not to nullify the things that are. God is amazing. He can take the most unusual people and he can do incredible things with them. It never ceases to amaze me. I think often of my friend Tyson, who just passed recently. Tyson was one of these guys that was just crazy. And he was crazy for God. And people were moved by his life. And I think of other people in my own experience whose lives would fit that very measure that Corinthians gives. We're not wise, we're not very influential, but God has taken us wherever we are, and he has done just unbelievable things with us. Take a look at the blind man. I laugh every time I read that story. He's sitting there, he's blind, been blind for 39 years. He was born blind. The guy had never seen anything, but he had heard of Jesus. And he's sitting there along the road, and the disciples are going by, and all of a sudden they try to get theological with Jesus, which is really funny to me, because you don't see this anywhere else in their lives. But they said, who sinned, this man or his parents? And Jesus said, neither this man nor his parents, but that you might see the glory of God. Now that must have taken him by surprise. Oh, what's he going to do? Earthquake, lightning, some big display? No, he works up this loogie in his mouth and spits it on the ground and starts making mud out of it. Takes the mud, wipes it on the eyes of this blind man, and told him to go wash and see. Now, here's the Creator God. He could have done anything. He could have spoken it. He could have just touched him. But no, he chose to use the saliva. And all of a sudden, you see something that mundane becomes majestic. Something that dull becomes divine. Something that humdrum becomes holy. My question to you, what is it in your life that God is using that is so unbelievably plain to show his mercy and his grace and his love to this world?
Wow. So God used mud instead of using his hands. He could have used his hands to heal, and he used mud. So what in your life has God used? The mundane, plain things in life. What have you noticed that God has used in your life?
Actually, I see this thing illustrated perfectly in the world of nature. Like all the time you see ants building nests. They're taking little grains of dirt and just turning it into something amazing, like an ant's nest, or a bird building a nest. It's the same thing.
Definitely.
And I think it's repeated throughout nature.
Yeah, as a surfer, I'd have to agree with you, spending time out there in nature. And the wind, like Jesus talks a lot about the wind and the water. And in John chapter 3, he says, do not marvel that I said to you, you must be born again. The wind blows where it wishes, and you hear the sound of it, but cannot tell where it comes from and where it goes. So is everyone who is born of the Spirit. And just as a surfer, out there in the water, like you see the influence of the wind on the water, you can feel it, but you can't see the wind, But it has it makes such a difference on the waves.
And it is the simple things that God often uses, I find. Like, think about the birth of Jesus. He was born in a stable, and yet he's the creator of the universe. I find that pretty amazing.
And Makushla, you have a different eye. You're an artist.
Yeah, I think you can find beauty in anything. I mean, I try and go for a walk in the morning, and in that stillness and the quiet, you see the flowers and you hear the birds, and it's amazing, just amazing the complexity that God has created in these objects.
And the sounds of nature as well,
Yeah.
you know, like little birds singing in the morning.
Okay.
It's a great time to be alive. eh?
So how else do we see this illustrated, like besides the world of nature? Has it happened in your life, Guy?
Yeah, actually, before I even knew there was a God, I was working as a postman, and I was during the training period. So I had 2 weeks of training, and it was towards the end. And the manager of the delivery centre sort of gave me an ultimatum, like, get it together, you got to be a professional now. And he told me if I made one single mistake, he'd write a bad report and I wouldn't have any more work. So I was feeling some pressure this one day, and I went out and I finished delivering the mail that was in my backpack. And then I'm given a key. And the key is to unlock what's called a depot box, but I couldn't find the depot box. Where's the depot box? So I walked down the road and I found another box, and it was just a delivery box, and I thought maybe they use this. So I put the key in, and this day changed my life because the key got stuck and I couldn't get it back out. It was almost back to vertical, couldn't get it out, and so I did everything in my power, and eventually realised I couldn't do anything to get this key out, and I thought maybe there's a God. And so I prayed, and I'd heard a friend pray before going surfing, and he prayed in the name of Jesus, so I thought I'll give that a try as well. I didn't even believe there was a God. And then when I came back to this box, the key was sitting vertically and it just slipped right out.
Apparently of its own accord.
That's right.
that's
and I came up with all different ideas, like maybe a
That is
bird
incredible.
came and landed on it or something like that, you know, but
You just got to recognise that it actually is God.
it was it was undeniable. And that one little thing, like we're talking about a few millimetres, has completely changed my life. So
Sure.
God used the mundane.
Sorry, guy, I'm gonna have to cut you off. We'll finish this right after the break.
Welcome back to the show. We've been discussing the idea of God taking our lives, which are pretty plain and boring often, and turning them into something beautiful. Of course, you're aware of the way that a butterfly is born from a caterpillar.
It's amazing, Levi. You know, something so sluggish and brown and all lumpy can, you know, be rested in this amazing wrap and become
Exactly.
a butterfly that is free to fly and explore, and all the colours, it's so intricate. God can just take that. He can take the mundane and make it so unbelievably beautiful. Like, look at the oyster, how an oyster's made. You know, the sand gets into the shell and it gets all gritty and it becomes this
an oyster.
amazing, precious thing. It's amazing.
I think that the process of transformation is incredibly important in this too. Like a caterpillar, it has to lie dormant for quite a period of time in order to blossom.
I think that's really important. It's not a one-step thing, it's a process.
Exactly.
You know, it happens over time. It's a gradual unveiling of God.
And it's a process that we can feel ourselves, you know, as people.
Yeah.
And when God comes into your life and changes you, I mean, some people feel like they're mundane and they're boring because they hear of other people's exciting lives. But they don't realize that their life can be exciting with God in it. And where you are here and now, you know, I mean.
I think sometimes we hold on to our own identity at all costs, but using the butterfly analogy is great because the caterpillar actually, I believe, becomes liquid and is completely recreated to become the butterfly. So that's incredible.
So we can
like-
even bring that back to ourselves, as in dying to ourselves. We have to have a period where we're not. It's as if we're dead, and then we come forth with new life.
In a previous episode, and we talked about new beginnings.
Yes.
And I mean, it's exactly like that. And you start fresh with God, exciting life, you know?
The Bible talks about God as a potter. You know, he takes this clay and he molds it and
molds it.
makes it. And
Exactly.
it's amazing. It really is
Definitely.
amazing what
So
God
many
does.
analogies.
There
I
are.
mean, even again in nature,
Yeah.
I was just thinking like a cherry tree blossoming.
Yeah.
It has to lie leafless for the whole winter.
And there are always
And,
seasons,
and
you
there's
know?
exactly, there's always seasons where something lies dormant and then it comes.
Where again, it's
comes
our
back
lives
to new
again.
life.
We have seasons in our own life, the ups, the downs, you know, but God is always here for us.
Ecclesiastes 3, you know, everything is beautiful in its own time. Like God has a reason and a season for things.
Sure.
Actually, I'm in a bit of a winter in my life at the moment. The direction I've been on for the last couple of years has sort of come to a dead end. And now I'm at this point where it's just like, well, God, what do you want me to do? And the other day I was reading in Genesis 1 where it says, the earth was without form and void, and darkness was on the face of the deep.
Yeah.
And I just really identified with the earth there, but I was encouraged by the next verse, because God speaks, let there be light. And so right now I'm just waiting, like, God, I know I have hope, and I know that you want to speak into my life. So I'm just taking the time to rest and be quiet, be still, and wait for God to speak.
And you're already ahead. I mean, you've taken the step and looked in the Bible and read. A lot of people just stop then and there. You know, it's really discouraging when you have that winter season in your life.
But I think the important thing for everybody to keep in mind is that God never uses people who are prominent to do his work. He takes what, like fishermen, prostitutes, he worked with in his career. Like he took those and he did beautiful things with them, and you never see it any other way. Like he works with those. He doesn't. I've heard it said many times, he doesn't call the equipped, he equips the called. I think
I
it's right.
have to agree with that, and I have an experience that ties in beautifully with that.
Yeah.
I was in Western Australia a few months ago doing a Yachtmaster sailing course, and it's a 4-month program, pretty intense. And another student came on board the boat for the week, and we had a different way of seeing things. You know, we weren't getting on very well, and at the end of his week on board, I felt like I'd failed to sort of share the loving character of God to him. I had a lot of stress, had an exam coming up and that kind of thing. So I apologised, and he just said, wow, you know, like, I've just been touched by your attitude this week. And I was like, who, me? What? You know,
you weren't even trying
but
to.
I'd been praying constantly all week, Lord, help me to love this person, because in and of myself, I had no
desire.
Natural affection towards the guy. His name's Paul. Anyway, so I offered to help carry his bags to the end of the jetty, and it started raining. And we were talking there, and he invited me to sit in his car with him. And it became a 4-hour conversation sitting in his car. And I was privileged to be able to share with him the gospel, you know. And I haven't memorized a great deal of scripture, but I just found there, it was almost like a Bible study. And I was just, like, scriptures were coming to my mind, and I was quoting
that's
them.
the amazing thing, though, is that when God impacts your life, you can't help but share
help
that and pass it on.
We did mention that in an earlier episode.
It's amazing.
It ties right into this.
Exactly.
And how things
It's
like that can come to
contagious.
your mind.
You want to be able to share that
Yeah.
experience, to be able to pass it on, and to be able to multiply that.
Yeah, and I think, like, because I felt so unworthy and yet so privileged at the same time, you know. And Paul gave his heart to the Lord there in the car that afternoon, you know, and that was so beautiful to be a part of that, part of his journey. And so just reflecting on that later on, I came upon this verse in 2 Corinthians chapter 12 and verse 9, where Jesus says to Paul, my grace is sufficient for you, for my strength is made perfect in weakness.
Amen. We're going to take a break. We'll be right back with you in a couple of moments.
Welcome. We've been discussing the plain and mundane in our lives and how God can turn everyone and everything into something majestic. Now, Guy, you found a verse or something, wasn't it? It was really amazing.
Well, I was thinking about that very thing, and how Jesus begins the Sermon on the Mount, blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. So step one in our journey of salvation is to recognize our poverty, you know, and that kind of creates the space, or the void, if you like, for God to speak his creative power into our lives.
It makes sense that when we're empty, we're available to be filled up. If we're too full of ourselves or whatever's going on around us, then we're not going to be able to be used. Exactly.
So that's why you hear so many stories of drug addicts and people that hit rock bottom and then see the light. And I'm about to share my testimony with you, which is a little bit similar. Yeah.
Can't wait to hear it. Isn't there a song about something beautiful? He made something beautiful out of my life? Because that kind of fits in with this. Do you guys know that song?
Beautiful, something good.
Something good, that's the one.
All
You
my
know the song.
confusion he understood.
It says all he had to offer. All I had to offer him was hopelessness and strife, but he made something beautiful out of my life. And that
I
says it.
think-
That sums it up.
Making implies a process, and I think that's the most important thing for me, is that it's a transformation. 2 Corinthians 3:18 says, "We who with unveiled faces all reflect the Lord's glory are being transformed into his likeness with ever-increasing glory, which comes from the Lord." I know I've said amazing a lot, but I can't think of any other word that describes the process other than amazing.
And it brings
Great.
forth how can God actually see plain and simple? Can he see even plain and simple? Because everything to him has so much potential. You know?
I don't think he does.
He sees what we can be.
Yeah.
I think he sees everything.
Exactly.
as
And he has
it
such
was
a detailed eye as well, you know, like you look at something in it through a microscope and then you look at the universe through a telescope and just the eye for detail, like God just makes things beautiful on every level.
Yeah.
But even
It's beautiful.
like your thumbprints, they're all different.
They're
like,
unique.
They're unique. There's no such thing as common with God. He sees us all as snowflakes.
Snowflakes are all unique.
Yeah.
Do we have a question that came through, Christina?
Actually, good point. We do. We have a few. We do have a few. Let's bring the fishbowl
I
out.
didn't even introduce our fish to the audience. This is Freddie, and we have Esmeralda.
Everyone say
as well.
hi. They like to jump out once in a while, you know?
Yeah.
All right, let's go to a question. A student wrote to us and said, "How do I know that God has made me into a beautiful person? I still feel like me."
Wow.
Good question. Did they read the verse in Samuel where God says, "Look not on the height of his countenance, for I have refused him"? But man looks on the outward appearance, but the Lord looks on the heart.
I guess if you don't notice a change, I mean, you are still you, but I mean, there should be a passion or some effect. You should feel something.
I think it's more you'll hear an echo in the world around you, you know, because as Christians we're not to look into the mirror and wonder, am I saved, am I transformed, you know, but just trust that God's going to do that. And like you said, Levi, give him the space to do it. He will do it. And you'll hear reports back from your friends, wow, you've changed, you know, but you might not feel a difference. I know I didn't really.
I don't think beautiful is an aesthetic thing. I think beautiful is a way of being.
Okay.
I think it, you know, it's how God is inside you and shines out of you, like a broken vase.
That's what he wants to do.
You know, light can only come out of something that's been broken, that can be seen through.
Wow.
We're going to hear now a small snapshot of Guy's experience with God, so can't wait.
Well, what I want to share with you is one day in my life, and it was an amazing day, to use the word amazing. It really was. I woke up an atheist and I went to bed that night a Christian. And so just to sort of set the scene, I was on the south coast of New South Wales on a surfing trip by myself, enjoying nature, and I finished my surf and I was just looking around me at the wonders and not even thinking, you know, because I didn't believe there was a God, but just being in awe of the beauty all around me. When I left the place, I got on a train, and the train trip goes, the train line goes along the top of some cliffs and through a forest in a national park and over a waterfall, through a tunnel and into a valley with horses, and it's a really beautiful trip south of Sydney. And I was looking out the window, and it just occurred to me that this is not an accident. This is a gift, and life is a gift. And so my journey was one of just really like a step-by-step logical progression. If life is a gift, there must be a giver. And the giver of life, at that point, I didn't know he, she, or it. So, but to use the word that we're familiar with in Western society, I called this being or this force God. And sitting there reflecting, it occurred to me, wow, I'm not an atheist anymore. I actually believe there is a God or a force or something out there. And reflecting on the next stage, I guess, was reflecting on the meaning of life. And looking back at my life, the most important and most meaningful moments in my life were moments found in relationships, sharing with people, and it was love. And so to kind of condense that into one idea, the meaning of life is love. So if there's a giver of life and he's pre-programmed me to find my meaning in love, then God must not be an inanimate force, but rather a personal being. And so something jumped inside me like, I want to have a relationship with my Creator. And just thinking back through my life, I felt a bit of a weight of guilt on my shoulders, literal weight of guilt. And it was only when I considered that, you know, if I was a father and my child was in trouble, I would do everything to try and lift them out of that place. And in that context, that God is a relational being who's given us the meaning of our lives is to love, it occurred to me that, of course, God would give his Son to walk this earth, to be an example and to carry our burdens to their final conclusion, our mistakes, if you like. And it all just became clear to me. But not wanting to dive in, I decided that later that evening when I got home after the train ride, I would pray. And so it wasn't until I got home later, on the walk from the end of the bus trip, train, then a bus, and then walking home through the park, I saw the beauty of nature all around me again. And I remembered my promise to myself that I would pray. And then all these thoughts came rushing in, like, you know, I've never needed God before. This is silly, you know. And so I basically, in the 3 minutes it took me to walk home, I decided it was all silly and I wasn't going to go ahead. And then I saw a poster a friend had left for me that it had the Footprints poem, and I just cried, and it brought me to my knees, and I just gave my heart to the Lord and accepted salvation in Christ that very day.
Thanks, Guy, for that amazing testimony.
Thank you so much.
We're all out of time, but thank you for coming. Thanks, audience. You've been a great audience. Thanks for being here today. Until next time, from us here in the studio, from Christina and I, and from the panel, we'd like to say thank you very much for watching, and we will see you next time.
Knowing my heart's cry for freedom, longing to flood your love into the pain of emptiness, to open my eyes to unquenchable love that gave everything for my freedom, even my Savior's blood. He is wonderful. No one is like him. His love unfathomable. No love is like his. You approached me with gentleness, asking, where are you? I was hiding for the shame of my nakedness, trying to cover myself in vain. You came to me with your own white garment. You came to me by your sacrifice. He is wonderful. No one is like him. His love unfathomable. No love is like his. I thought surely you'd be ashamed of me by now. Surely you'd have given up on me by now. But you were right here. You stayed right here. Your love goes deeper than I ever knew. From the dark depths of despair, love lifted me. He is why